Before 1950, front porches lined nearly every Canadian street. Then, in barely a generation, they vanished. The common explanation is that tastes simply changed. Canadians moved indoors and chose television over sidewalk conversation. But buried inside federal mortgage guidelines from the 1940s is a quieter answer. A single appraisal rule made the porch financially worthless overnight. Nobody banned it. They just ensured no builder could afford to include one. The machinery behind this shift was assembled during the final months of the Second World War. With thousands of veterans returning home to a massive housing shortage, the federal government passed the National Housing Act of 1944. This legislation consolidated housing finance under a single system, establishing the federal government as the chief architect of Canadian suburban growth. To run this program, Ottawa created the Central Mortgage and Housing Corporation, CMHC, on January 1, 1946. CMHC's primary tool was mortgage insurance. The agency did not build most houses directly. Instead, it backed the private bank loans that made mass construction possible. But this financial backing came with strict conditions. To qualify for a federally insured mortgage, a home had to meet strict design and cost requirements. In 1947, CMHC published a catalogue titled 67 Homes for Canadians. It was a collection of simple, pre-approved blueprints designed to reduce costs and speed up construction. The book was a massive success, selling over 29,000 copies in its first year alone. Builders across Canada seized on these patterns because they offered a shortcut to financing. If a developer built a home using a design straight from the CMHC catalogue, the mortgage approval was virtually guaranteed. These plans favoured compact, highly standardised structures, like the small square bungalows that soon dominated new suburbs. To keep these homes cheap and fast to build, architects omitted non-essential elements. The traditional large front porch, which required extra materials, roof framing, and labour, was quietly left off the drawing boards. In the rush to solve a national crisis, the Federal Housing Authority had standardised the Canadian streetscape, and in doing so they left the porch behind. The disappearance of the porch came down to a cold financial calculation. When the Canada Mortgage and Housing Corporation evaluated a house for mortgage insurance, appraisers relied on a strict metric known as gross living area. To count toward this total, a space had to be fully enclosed, finished, and heated. Because a covered front porch was open to the elements, it was categorized as non-livable space. This meant a porch added 0 square footage to the home's official appraisal value. Yet building one was not free. It required extra framing, roofing, and labor, adding roughly 10 to 15% to the facade's construction cost. For a builder, this created a severe financial penalty. If they spent thousands of dollars to add a front porch, the bank's appraiser valued the home as if it did not exist. In a system where high-ratio loans depended on squeezing every dollar of appraised value out of the construction cost, builders faced a clear choice. They could spend money on unvalued outdoor space, or they could redirect those funds toward finished interior rooms that raised the appraised price. Under these rules, dropping the porch was a completely rational economic decision. Federal funding guidelines had quietly rewritten the blueprint of the Canadian home. Before the war, a typical Canadian home kept the automobile out of sight. Families parked their cars in small, detached garages at the very back of the property, reaching them through shared rear service lanes. This layout kept the front of the lot quiet, green and reserved for the sidewalk, the front yard, and the porch. But in the early 1950s, the Canada Mortgage and Housing Corporation issued new subdivision planning manuals that changed the geometry of the neighbourhood. The federal agency advised developers to eliminate rear service lanes entirely. Doing so reduced municipal construction costs, saving cities money on pavement, storm drains, and utility trenching. Municipalities quickly turned this advice into local law. Toronto banned new rear lanes in 1952, and Hamilton followed with similar restrictions in 1954. Without a back alley, builders had only one place to put the car, the front of the house. Developers shortened lot depths from 60 feet to 45 feet to pack more homes onto a single street. To make this tighter layout work, they moved the garage directly to the street-facing facade. By 1965, the attached front-facing garage had claimed the very physical space where the front porch once stood. In the late 1950s and 1960s, municipal zoning bylaws turned porches into legal liabilities. New local regulations defined a covered porch as part of the home's principal structure, rather than an outdoor amenity. This meant any porch extending from the front of the house counted toward the minimum front yard setback, which often required homes to sit 25 to 45 feet back from the property line. If a builder wanted a substantial, functional porch, they had to push the entire house further back, reducing backyard space. Simultaneously, new parking bylaws mandated dedicated off-street parking spaces on each lot. A projecting porch directly competed with the driveway and parking pad. Without ever passing an explicit ban, city halls across Canada had codified the porch out of existence. In his 1989 study, The Great Good Place, sociologist Ray Oldenburg identified front porches, stoops, and front gardens as essential transitional, semi-public spaces. These structures serve as everyday thresholds, offering a physical buffer between the absolute privacy of the home and the fully public realm of the sidewalk. They provide a space for quiet observation, creating opportunities for incidental contact and informal watchfulness, the casual eyes on the street that help keep neighborhoods safe. When these physical platforms disappeared, the social fabric of the Canadian street changed. A study in 2020 by the Canadian Institute of Planners illuminated this shift, revealing that residents on pre-war, porch-rich streets knew an average of 6 of their neighbors by name. On post-war, garage-forward suburban blocks, that number plummeted to just 1.4. The human reality of this data is felt in daily routines. One resident of an older Hamilton neighborhood recalls spending summer evenings on the porch, greeting passers-by and watching local children play. In contrast, a resident of a newer development in Scarborough describes a routine of drive-in anonymity, driving directly into an attached garage and closing the door before ever stepping outside. Urban sociologists caution that architecture alone does not cause or cure social isolation. However, the physical design of a house dictates the probability of spontaneous encounters. When policy and finance pushed the front porch off the blueprint, they removed more than wood and shingles. They dismantled the primary stage where informal community life once played out. In the 1990s, developers began experimenting with a return to porch-centered design under the banner of new urbanism. In master-planned communities like Cornell in Markham and Mackenzie Town in Calgary, builders brought back front porches, shallow setbacks, and rear service lanes. The market responded immediately. A 2024 Royal LePage study revealed that homes with covered front porches sold for 4 to 7% more than comparable porch-absent houses. What post-war policy once discarded as an unnecessary expense became a premium luxury asset. Yet these developments remain a tiny fraction of Canadian housing. As suburban construction continues, the vast majority of new builds remain garage-forward and driveway-dominated. A systemic return to the porch cannot happen through marketing alone. It requires overturning the very rules that erased them in the first place, reforming appraisal metrics that exclude porches from livable space, restructuring the economics of subdivision servicing, and rewriting municipal zoning bylaws to make front porches a standard right rather than a heavily regulated exception. Today, we pay a premium to buy back the connected neighborhoods we once built by default. The vanished porch proves that community is shaped by policy, not preference. If we want to rebuild social cohesion, we must first rewrite the rules. Share your thoughts on your neighborhood below.